All right. Hello, my dear friends. Welcome back. So, of course, previously we installed the Anaconda Integrated Development Environment, or IDE. In other words, the distributor, according to our operating system, and learned how to open our interfaces. So now, before we get to using our Python programming language, we're just going to learn how to reorganize and use the different features of these interfaces. And that way you'll be a lot more comfortable with them as we progress. So first of all, as we talked about before, we use two different interfaces. One is this, Jupyter Notebook, and the other is Jupyter Tab. All right, so we can do the same with these two interfaces, but I do want to explain each and both, and I'll let you choose actually which one you want to work with. So why then would we learn about both of these in this course? Because these two interfaces are the most used IDE. All right, guess what? Get ready for parallel learning. So let's get acquainted with our Jupyter Notebook without talking anymore about it. And I'm sure that you remember how to open the Anaconda distribution. And here it's open, and from here we'll open the Jupyter Notebook. So this is the interface that we're going to work with. But what are we actually doing here? Well, we open our interface by pressing the launch button. And there you go. The notebook is open. And we'll need to open up an interface like that. So this interface is actually a web interface. Yeah, so it's in this newly opened tab. We have the opportunity to use Jupyter Notebook via a web interface. So now let's see how we'll proceed through this Jupyter Notebook. So first off, we're going to determine which file that we want to work on. Now here you'll see various files. I created a Python work file on the desktop, and I want to work in that directory. So let's just get into this file. So here there's no file in it. You can see that, right? So we're going to create a new Python file inside this file. See, so how are we going to do that? So there is a new button on the top right. If you click there and specify the shape of the file that we want to start. And here we see which files that we can open. So we can open a Python or text file, another folder with this file, or the terminal, the black code screen. And yeah, since we're going to be working on Python, just want to click the Python 3 button. Okay, so our new Python file has now been opened. Let's start by changing the name first. That's how I usually do it. So we'll call it a Jupyter Notebook review. So I'll say reviewing a Jupyter Notebook. All right, so that's the name. We'll continue. Now we can write some code. So look at the code that we write here. Each cell is called a line of code. Okay? Yes. We'll be able to see the output of each of these lines of code that we write directly. So this is one aspect of our interface. It makes our work a whole lot easier. And continuing on, we can duplicate lines of code from the plus sign above, or click on the cell, and you can perform this process as a shortcut with the letter B. Okay, so see that? We've now added a few lines of code. Yes, indeed, you can use the scissors to delete a line of code, or you can do it just by pressing the letter D twice in fairly quick succession as a shortcut. Now, I generally recommend using these keyboard shortcuts. And of course, you could say, well, how are we going to know what all the shortcuts are? Well, there is a keyboard sign if you click here. And you can access all the shortcuts, and I'm sure you'll learn them quite quickly. Now here's a delete, and of course, it's a shortcut for the deletion process. I want to show you some of the shortcuts that we're going to use frequently throughout, and then you can review the other ones at your leisure. Okay, so I want to introduce you to another critical issue. We don't want to write code. Huh? Yeah. We want to write title or text. See, that's why we're using notebooks. Very suitable for this text writing job. So we can actually display it in the format that we want with the type of font we want. So for example, how do we do it if we want to title our codes? Well, we can click on our line of code, and to determine the title size, just write in Specify it from the number keys like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So for example, let's say that we want a number 2 headline. And look at this. When I press 2, a hashtag symbol appears like this. See, so now we can write our title. All right, so what are we going to write? Well, we can write the name of our file reviewing the Jupyter Notebook. Yeah, so let's run this line of code now. And for this, you can just use the Run button above, or you can just use Shift-Enter as a shortcut. Now, I recommend that you use a shortcut, of course, because each time you have to go and do the Run button, of course, who wants to do all that, right? Efficiency we're talking about. So anyway, Shift-Enter. And you can see the code works. Our line of code moved to a lower line. Okay, so that's good. We can do this text writing process like this. There are various options here, such as code, markdown, etc. So these are going to allow us to choose what our line of code will be. For example, if I do this as a markdown option, not a code option, my line of code has changed to write text. Follow? So we can also do this by clicking on our line of code and pressing the first letter M in markdown. Yeah, so now we can also do this manually, just putting a hashtag here. For example, we'll write hashtag, leave a space, and enter the text that we want to match. So I'll also say example. Okay, so we can increase the number of hashtags and decrease the font size. All right. So let's continue. Let's say Shift-Enter, and that'll run the code. Very cool, very cool. So now let's write code instead of text and see what that output's going to look like. All right, so we'll perform a small mathematical operation here. Let's say add 7 to 5. Yeah, well, that is very small. But anyway, when you do Shift-Enter, see how it gives us 12. So in other words, we can see the immediate output of the lines of code that we write, right? Right, okay. So you can also change these lines of code just by using the arrows here. That changes the place. For example, we'll move this one up. So I'll click on my line of code and press the up arrow. All right, so it goes up. You can do that for the down arrow. And now that you know that, we'll continue. So I'm going to show you something very important here. You can take notes. Yeah, in fact, you can write a lot of code in the future, and there will be hundreds of lines here. Sometimes a program does not respond when you want to run some new code, colloquially known as the program freezes. In that case, this is what we do. So see here, there's a kernel button. Just press it, and various options appear. And we'll usually be using the options that start with restart. So see here, restart will rerun the selected code. So restart and clear output. Well, that's going to just restart and delete the outputs, and you will be able to run whatever you want manually. That's for the whole notebook, right? So let's have a look. When I click the button, see how a warning comes up and says, do you want to do this? Well, it doesn't really matter now because we're going to rerun it. So yeah, we'll continue. And when we press the red button, we see the outputs have been reset. And previously, there was the result of our mathematical operation here. And now, of course, it's not. Now, again, we can understand that this code line is reset, or our code line is not working as follows. See, there's no number in the square bracket to show how many numbers our code is. So here we are rerunning our lines of code. Okay, so now look at the Restart and Run All tab, which is the last kernel tab that we'll examine. So this resets our lines of code, but automatically reruns them all. All right, so let's do it now. Again, the same warning appears, and we continue with the red button. So see, it restarts and quickly runs all the lines by itself. All right, my friends, now let's have a look at how to export the notebook that we're working on and to upload a file that we want from the outside. And then we'll wrap it up, okay? So let's examine the exporting of the file first. Yeah, so we're done with the notebook that we've been working on, let's say. So the first thing we're going to do is save it. It saves automatically, but you know what? I need to have confirmation, right? I don't want to be up all night worrying if my file actually is still there. So look, there's a save button here. What happens if you click it? So now you can see that our work's been saved, right? Now we click on our file button above and see the options below. And see this? There's an option called Download As. So it asks what we want to export it as. And here we will export it as a notebook. Now, if you've noticed, it is with the IPNYB extension. Right. So when I press this section, I see the completed download process. Now we can use this notebook wherever we want or transfer it to someone else via email or whatever. So now let's examine how we're going to do that. Okay, so let's just close this file that we're working on and come into our main file. And we're in the Python work file, by the way. So here, see this? This is the file that we just worked on, so we're deleting it. Okay, so it's empty again. Now let's upload the file that we have previously downloaded. And look at this, we have an upload button here. What happens if I click on it? A window opens where we can choose what we want to install. Now, it was in the download folder, right? So I'll see here, I've got a notebook file, latest download, and I want to upload it again. So we can just select this file and open it below. All right, so I've brought it into this position to upload it to Jupyter. Now, I just want to perform one last operation. And see here, when we click on upload, it got my file to the working position. So why don't we just open it up and check it out. There's a notebook that we've been working on. Okay, pretty simple, easy peasy, but now you got your feet wet or whatever expression you want to use. Doesn't make a difference. You've got an introduction to how we get going. I've introduced you to a beautiful new interface, and we've talked about some of the situations in general that we're going to encounter using our Jupyter notebook. But next time, I want to examine yet another interface, and that, of course, you might remember is known as the Jupyter Lab, where we're going to do all kinds of operations. All right, I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye for now.